Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'm an editor with LaRouchePack.com, and I would like to welcome you once again to a live webcast featuring Mr. Lyndon LaRouche. This is the fourth in our series, our ongoing series of webcasts, which we started a month ago and will be continuing all the way through the November 6th elections, which are now only 10 days away. So there will be one more of these broadcasts between now and the November 6th elections. However, also, I'd like to announce that this coming Tuesday, there will be a very special event featuring Mr. LaRouche also at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. That's October 30th at 9:30 in the morning. So our broadcast tonight will be very significant in its own right, but also must be seen as a crucial prelude to that event which will be occurring this coming Tuesday. Now, our format will follow the same as it has previously. Mr. LaRouche will start with opening remarks, which will be followed by a dialogue period between Mr. LaRouche and two audience members we have here in the studio with us tonight. So in order to get right to the point, without any further introduction, I present to you Mr. Lyndon LaRouche.
Well, thank you. Now, I'll do a little prelude right now, that we're going to be doing things not only tonight, but in that event next Tuesday referred to, and beyond, in which will be somewhat different because the climate is different, the circumstances are different, the shortness of the breadth, shall we say, of history is also significant. What we have to think about is to take a little self-reflection on ourselves and the role we're playing here as a part to what we're saying about the audience and its figures out there. That there are certain advantages and limitations in speaking from a platform such as this, in trying to get ideas across to a population. Now, in my knowledge, the populations, and I've been an old geezer at this thing, there are people in society who, I'll only talk about nice people, generally. But there are nice people in society who are much more talented through development of their ideas, the way they think, the way of so forth, than others. And in a process such as this, you will find that in the general audience of the population, you will find some people who are rather quickly will get on at least of the scent of the trail that's involved. And some people may take years to catch up with them. And that's the nature of society. So that when we're speaking to, as we speak, in this kind of framework, in this kind of projection, in this kind of audience, what we're addressing largely, but not exclusively, but largely, we're addressing people who are much quicker and better informed than the average person. And that is not something we should feel that it's bad. It's necessary because in society naturally there's a very tiny part of the total population, even in the United States, for example, or in leading European nations. Only a tiny part really gets it, as the word goes. And therefore we try to address ourselves, and as I do, knowing that the importance of what we do and the effect of what we do depends upon the people through whom what we say radiates. And therefore, our primary concern is not to talk down to the audience, but rather to bring the audience up to the level we're trying to represent. We're going to see that tonight. We will see that in the event next week, beginning next week. The same thing. We're presenting, for example, let's take a problem. How many people in the United States, as an audience, adult audience, really understand what the devil is going on? How many of them have any idea in the world? You know, because if they were all intelligent people, none of them would vote for Obama, for example. And they would give also his rival a very hard run for his money, because they wouldn't put up with the nonsense which is typical of the addresses of audiences to the candidates. What I've been seeing in the candidate performances is to me, is disgusting, because we're not providing real leadership. Real leadership is uplifting the capability of the population generally to understand what the whole thing is about. The way this is done, as you see with both Obama, who's the worst at it, and also his rival, that they really talk down to the audience, not try to bring the audience up. Here you've got a situation in the world, for example, and what you have in Europe, Europe is about to disintegrate. Europe is going into a hyperinflation, an accelerated hyperinflation. We, too, are already on the brink of doing the same thing. Hyperinflation. And what is the response of the population to the election campaigns? Do they reflect any concern about that issue? They don't. And therefore, our job here, my job here, or in other people in the same circumstances, is to focus on getting a proper message across to the audience, hoping to reach the best part of the audience in terms of competence of understanding, and hoping that they in turn will be sufficiently inspired to inspire others who need to be uplifted. And what I see in the operation is what's been done to the population, both by the one candidate and the other, are doing the same thing. They're talking down to the people. They're not telling them the truth. They're telling them things like diversions. There's something going on, and they say, oh, don't pay attention to that automobile accident, even if it's theirs. And that's the kind of thing you get in these campaigns. So our job here, and we'll be continuing in the coming short weeks ahead, will be exactly that. Our opposition is not to try to talk down to the people to sound popular. Our job is to tell the truth, even when it's a hard truth or a difficult truth, because you're not going to help the American people or the people in Europe by talking down to them. You've got to lift them up. You've got to inspire them. And this kind of thing that I saw with this performances recently, this sideshow that went on down in Florida particularly, this thing was the most disgusting thing I ever saw produced. I mean, the most immoral thing imaginable. There was not a single thing, really, about the way that thing was organized, which would actually convey substantive concepts to people, including ordinary people. And the ordinary population can be reached, but you've got to go slower. Don't give this fast talk. Give them an explanation, point by point. Let them ask questions. Let them get into the thing. They don't know what thermonuclear war is. When have you seen the discussion of thermonuclear war on a presidential campaign? And what is our Joint Chiefs of Staff most concerned about? And the military of other countries. They're concerned that we're on the edge of a thermonuclear war, which is coming out of this pit pot or whatever in the Middle East. And this thing is ready to go. This thing started a long time ago. I've been on the case for a long time. Reporting on exactly this phenomenon. And this phenomenon has crept and grown and grown and grown. It's now reached threshold level. A very slight tilt in the development of things now could trick the whole system into a thermonuclear war. Now, let me be brutal about this. What we're on the edge of, as our Joint Chiefs of Staff know and say, as the Russian leadership knows and says, as key leadership in Europe, on a lesser degree, knows and says, as China knows and says, we are moments away, in terms of the history, from a thermonuclear war. Now, what has a thermonuclear war been? And don't get scared. You've got to listen to this, because this is what you're going to really vote on. You may not know it, but you're going to really vote on whether this nation is going to be destroyed by itself in participating in a thermonuclear war. Let me explain. It's really very simple to explain. Some of the technology is more difficult. But a thermonuclear war means, with Obama as President of the United States, and that's where Obama is the present trigger for thermonuclear war throughout the world. If Obama is able to overcome the objections of our Joint Chiefs of Staff and other leading people in the United States and exert the presidential authority over those leaders in our system, the United States will soon disappear. I mean soon. It can happen in a very short period of time from now. It's on the edge always right now. Nothing has been done to stop it. That means that what would happen is the United States under Obama would be compelled to launch a thermonuclear attack on Russia, China, etc. Immediately, within a matter of minutes, there would be a responsive barrage from Russia, China, and other countries. Britain would be involved, France would be involved heavily, and so forth. Now, what would happen is the first blast would come with a matter of relative minutes, within the hour. And then there would be a second one, which would come later. Now, when that was done, and this would all occur within 1 hour and a half, 1 hour and a half, and from that point, we don't know what part of the human species is going to be left alive. And that is what's in front of all of us right now. And if you're not thinking about thermonuclear war and what's wrong in particular with Obama's, because Obama is the keystone for launching thermonuclear war. He wasn't the start of this process. He just fell into pace on this process. And you saw it in the case of what happened in North Africa. Obama violated the Constitution with the consent of a crooked member of Congress, conducted a war that was illegal under our Constitution in Libya. And once he did that, he said, okay, now we've killed our man in Libya. And he's, now we can go on with the next war. Now, first of all, the man in question was a captive, a wounded captive. So the Obama forces executed him. That's a crime. It's a crime under international law. But he said he had to do it. Why? In order to get on with the next target. Which was the next target? In the Middle East, which is now going on right now. Now, now this is the cockpit of the war problem. Now we've got Turkey involved. The situation is Turkey being involved as an aggressor against Syria, which is an operation being run, actually directed by Obama from the United States, with the cooperation of the British monarchy. And other people as stooges are falling in line on the basis of NATO treaties and so forth. Once it reaches the level where there's an actual threat or the sign of a launch of thermonuclear war from anyone in Western Europe or the United States, within minutes, the Russian, the Chinese, and other systems go into play. Now, you can go back and look at back in a couple of decades ago, where the Russian hockey-mockey at that time had launched a super bomb, a supernuclear bomb. And a supernuclear bomb has certain fringes of thermonuclear effect. Now, Khrushchev, the gentleman in question, then exploded this bomb in Siberia in order to demonstrate the power that this bomb represented. That was the putative explanation for the thing. This thing came up with a dark cloud, which lasted for a period of time, and indicated that what a real thermonuclear war would be like. A black period over the whole area of relevance and the sign of doom. Now, in this case, we're talking about full-scale thermonuclear warfare from all the leading powers of the planet and going into it in order to achieve some so-called goal or to punish somebody or something like that. Now, everybody who's sane in international major powers, major nations, which have all the capabilities necessary of a major nation to know things, the intelligence services, the spy system, all these kinds of things. They all know it. So there you have everyone. You have Russia and the United States are actually at peace with each other in terms of military services. They're trying to negotiate a resolution of problems which do not lead to thermonuclear war. The President of the United States currently and his British backers are going full speed ahead, hoping that they can bluff their way into getting submission and not having to go through the war. And there are even some of them who are nuts who would go through the war rather than let the world get out of their hands. That is what every citizen of the United States ought to be told before going to the polls. Do they want a thermonuclear war? If Obama, in particular, and he's the most likely character of this cause, if Obama were to decide to launch a thermonuclear war, it's probably the case that most of civilization would no longer exist for some long time to come. And maybe, in the consequences, maybe nobody would exist. And this is the decision which the American population is not being told about, but that is the issue which may be determined by the outcome of this election. And this is because what you've been given as people by the candidacies, the campaigns, you've given them a bunch of crap. Explanations, diversions, this explanation of that, explanation of this, argument about this, all of which has nothing to do with determining whether mankind as a species continues to exist. Now, we can deal with that problem. If we control our own president and control a couple of other major powers on this planet, we can prevent this from happening. But so far, Obama has no intention of letting it be prevented. So you're going to the polls by a policy which leads toward a thermonuclear war within a matter of a very short period of time in terms of these events, either during this year or early next year. Because they can't postpone it much longer. Because what you have also at the same time, you have a collapse, either a disintegration through hyperinflation, which is now accelerating inside the United States and accelerating more rapidly inside Europe. So within a fairly short time, in terms of months, you'll reach a point at which the ability to run a thermonuclear war may be limited or impossible or just not done. But this is the situation. And if the public out there, the citizens, aren't getting that truth, but they're getting this crap, which is, I think, is the only term for it, then the public is voting like a pack of idiots. Not because they're wrong, not because they're idiots, but because the candidates and other people of relevance are making them appear to be like idiots by telling them fairy stories and instead of telling them the truth about the consequences of how and who they select for president and other key positions in the United States itself. And that's where we are. Now I'll have occasion to mention this same problem next week, in two occasions next week. But that's the theme we have to do now. If you're not serious, unless you raise the question and the issue of Obama's determination, together with the British, or especially with Tony Blair, shall we say, the determination of them to launch us to the brink or over the brink in thermonuclear war. And if we go to the brink, we'll probably go over the brink because of what's going on in the mentality of the people out there. And therefore, this fact is the fact which was never mentioned openly to the public of the United States. And asking these poor people in the public who don't know what they're getting into to vote for somebody, and I'm talking about both leading candidates, who have not told the truth, the most crucial truth about this whole election campaign period. And that's my job here, to say that, because I'm an expert in this area, this particular area, one of my few areas of real special expertise. but this is my area. I saw this thing from the beginning in a thing I produced back in the 1990s, Psalm over Asia. And I laid out exactly how this thing was threatened to come. And there were some incidents, and I produced a television show which contained that evidence and presented that as saying, here, you have a live case that's happening in the former Soviet territory. And we saw the implications of it were the beginning of a thermonuclear war. And we've been at that ever since then. And everybody who's competent in terms of strategic planning, in terms of military things especially, knows this. But the politicians, the ones who are lying, like the two leading candidates are, they're lying. Because they both know that this is what the issue is, and they are not telling the American people.